Chosen one. There is a moment many people experience that leaves them confused at first. You find yourself being criticized, mocked, or quietly targeted, and when you look back at the situation honestly, you struggle to understand what you actually did to deserve it. You were not hostile, you were not manipulative. In many cases, you barely said anything at all. Yet somehow the tension appears anyway, and the reaction from others feels stronger than the situation itself would normally justify. When this pattern repeats across different environments, friend groups, workplaces, even family spaces, it begins raising an important question. Why would someone attack you when you have not attacked them? The answer often has less to do with your actions and more to do with what your presence reflects back to them. In simple terms, you become a mirror. A mirror does not argue, accuse, or confront. It simply shows what is already there. When someone stands in front of a mirror, the reflection appears automatically, whether they asked for it or not. In human relationships, something similar can happen. Certain people carry qualities that naturally highlight the emotional or behavioral patterns around them. When you move with integrity, discipline, or calm self-respect, those qualities create contrast. You do not have to criticize anyone directly. The difference in behavior already communicates the message. Your honesty reflects someone else's dishonesty. Your emotional stability reflects someone else's chaos. Your boundaries reflect someone else's tendency to manipulate. None of these reflections require words. The contrast alone becomes visible, and that visibility can make people uncomfortable when they are not ready to face what the mirror shows them. This is why attacks sometimes appear in situations where no direct conflict exists. The reaction is not about what you said, it is about what your presence revealed.
To understand this dynamic clearly, it helps to recognize the difference between feedback and attack. Feedback is about behavior and growth. When someone offers feedback, they usually address a specific action and suggest how it might be improved. The conversation stays focused on learning and resolution. Attack, however, behaves very differently. Instead of focusing on behavior, it targets identity. The goal becomes reducing the person rather than improving the situation. Someone might label you with a single word that attempts to define your entire character. They might question your motives, exaggerate small mistakes, or reinterpret neutral actions as evidence of arrogance or manipulation. These responses are not designed to create understanding. They are designed to damage credibility and regain emotional control. When someone feels exposed by what the mirror shows them, attacking the mirror can feel easier than examining the reflection. By discrediting you, they hope to discredit the contrast your presence created. This reaction often happens subconsciously. Many people do not wake up intending to resent someone who behaves with integrity or self-respect. But when your behavior quietly reveals areas where someone else feels insecure, the mind begins searching for ways to restore comfort. Instead of acknowledging the reflection and choosing personal growth, some individuals choose to reduce the mirror itself. They reinterpret your calmness as arrogance. They call your privacy secrecy. They describe your discipline as obsession, or your confidence as superiority. These labels allow them to transform the reflection into something easier to dismiss. Once the mirror is framed as flawed, they no longer have to face what it revealed. The story becomes simpler. Instead of confronting their own behavior, they convince themselves that you are the problem. Over time, this dynamic can create confusion for the person being targeted. You may begin wondering whether you are somehow responsible for the hostility you encounter. You might question whether your boundaries appear too strong, or whether your independence is being misinterpreted. While self-reflection is always healthy, it is also important to recognize when the reaction around you has more to do with the mirror effect than with any genuine mistake. When multiple environments respond similarly to the same qualities,
discipline, honesty, calm confidence, the pattern becomes clearer. Your presence consistently creates contrast, and that contrast triggers reactions in people who are not comfortable with what they see in the reflection. Understanding this frame changes how you interpret criticism and hostility. Instead of assuming every attack is proof that you did something wrong, you begin examining the deeper emotional context behind the reaction. Sometimes people are not fighting you, they are fighting the reflection you unintentionally hold in front of them. And when someone cannot face themselves honestly, the easiest target becomes the mirror itself. Chosen one. Once you understand the idea that your presence can function like a mirror, the next step is understanding why that mirror triggers such strong reactions in certain people. The answer often begins with exposure. Exposure does not require confrontation. It happens naturally when different levels of discipline, honesty, or emotional maturity occupy the same space. When you carry calmness into a room where people are used to chaos, the difference becomes visible without anyone saying a word. When you speak honestly in an environment where manipulation is common, the contrast appears immediately. When you maintain consistent standards in situations where others rely on excuses, the gap between behavior and intention becomes easier to see. None of this requires you to accuse anyone. A mirror does not accuse. It reveals. And when someone suddenly sees a reflection they were not expecting, the emotional reaction can be intense. For many people, the discomfort of exposure does not come from the presence of the mirror itself, but from the realization that their behavior is now visible in a different light. They were comfortable with certain habits when those habits existed within a group that behaved the same way. But when a different example appears nearby, the environment changes. The mirror quietly raises a question. If another way of living is possible, why haven't I chosen it? That question can feel threatening because answering it honestly requires responsibility. Contrast amplifies that feeling even further. Human beings tend to normalize whatever behavior surrounds them most frequently. In a room where gossip is common, gossip begins to feel normal. In a workplace where shortcuts are accepted, cutting corners feels practical rather than unethical. But when someone enters that environment and refuses to participate in those patterns, the contrast becomes visible immediately. If you remain silent when gossip begins, others may interpret that silence as judgment, even when you never criticized anyone directly. If you follow ethical standards in a place where shortcuts are routine, some individuals may see your behavior as a challenge to their own choices. The reality is that you are simply operating according to your values. Yet the contrast creates psychological pressure for those who notice the difference. Instead of questioning their own habits, some people try to reinterpret the contrast as arrogance. They may describe your discipline as self-righteousness or your boundaries as emotional distance. These labels help reduce the discomfort created by the comparison. If they can convince themselves that your behavior is excessive or unrealistic, the reflection loses its power. The mirror becomes easier to dismiss because the standard it represents has been reframed as unnecessary. Another reason the mirror triggers strong reactions is accountability pressure. When someone lives with consistent standards, the expectations around them quietly rise. Integrity becomes harder to ignore when someone nearby demonstrates it consistently. If you refuse to participate in dishonest practices, others may feel the pressure to justify why they continue doing so. Your presence does not force accountability, but it introduces the possibility of it. In environments where people are used to operating without scrutiny, that possibility can feel threatening. Suddenly, the cost of maintaining certain behaviors becomes higher because the contrast makes those behaviors more visible. Some individuals respond to that pressure by adjusting their actions and growing alongside the example they see. Others respond by trying to remove the pressure entirely. Lowering the mirror becomes easier than raising their own standards. This is when criticism, ridicule, or rumors often appear. If they can reduce your credibility or portray your integrity as unrealistic, the accountability pressure disappears. The mirror no longer holds the same influence because the reflection has been questioned. The dynamic becomes even more complicated when envy and insecurity remain unspoken. Most people do not openly admit that they feel threatened by someone else's character or discipline. Instead, those emotions are disguised through indirect behavior. Someone might begin making sarcastic remarks about your habits or questioning whether your intentions are genuine. They may reinterpret your privacy as secrecy or your independence as arrogance. These comments allow them to release the tension created by the mirror without acknowledging the deeper source of their discomfort. In many cases, the individual may not even recognize that their reaction comes from insecurity. The mind simply searches for an explanation that restores emotional comfort. Criticizing the mirror becomes that explanation.
Understanding these triggers, exposure, contrast, and accountability, changes the way you interpret the attacks that sometimes appear around you. The hostility you encounter is not always a direct response to something you did. Often, it is a response to what your presence represents. When someone refuses to face the reflection they see, the mirror itself becomes the easiest target. Recognizing this pattern allows you to remain grounded rather than confused when criticism appears without clear cause. Instead of assuming you must shrink your standards to avoid conflict, you begin understanding that the tension arises because the mirror introduced a level of clarity that some people were not ready to accept. Chosen one, once the mirror effect begins triggering discomfort in others, the tension rarely stays internal for long. When someone feels exposed by what your presence reflects, the mind often searches for ways to reduce or discredit the mirror. Because openly admitting insecurity or envy would require uncomfortable honesty, the reaction usually appears through indirect behavior. The attack becomes disguised. It hides behind sarcasm, rumors, labels, and subtle attempts to lower your credibility. At first, these behaviors may seem random or confusing, but when you step back and observe the pattern, you begin recognizing the same strategies appearing again and again. One of the most common forms of attacking the mirror is projection. Projection happens when someone accuses you of the very behavior they are struggling with internally. Instead of acknowledging their own insecurity, they assign that insecurity to you. A person who feels threatened by your confidence may label you as arrogant. Someone uncomfortable with your privacy may call you secretive or dishonest. A person who feels competitive toward you may claim that you are the one trying to prove superiority. These accusations often feel strange because they do not match your intentions.
But the logic behind projection is simple. By transferring their own internal conflict onto you, they temporarily escape the discomfort of confronting it within themselves. The mirror is reframed as the problem, and the reflection becomes easier to ignore. Another strategy often used to attack the mirror is labeling and character reduction. Instead of engaging with the complexity of who you are, someone reduces your entire identity to a single word or stereotype. This tactic simplifies the narrative around you. Rather than acknowledging your discipline, someone might call you obsessive. Instead of recognizing your boundaries, they might describe you as cold or difficult. If your focus or independence makes them uncomfortable, they may frame it as arrogance. These labels function as shortcuts that allow others to dismiss the qualities your presence represents. Once you have been reduced to a simple category, the mirror no longer requires thoughtful reflection. The label replaces understanding, and the person using it feels justified in ignoring what your behavior actually demonstrates. Mockery is another common way people try to weaken the mirror. Humor and sarcasm can become tools used to reduce someone's social standing without appearing openly hostile. Jokes are made about your discipline, your goals, or the choices you make to improve your life. The tone often suggests that the remark is harmless or playful, which makes it difficult to challenge without appearing overly sensitive. But the pattern becomes clearer when the jokes consistently target the same qualities that create contrast. Over time, the goal of the humor becomes visible. By turning your standards into something laughable, the person speaking attempts to make the mirror less threatening. If others laugh along, the reflection appears less serious, and the pressure to examine it disappears. Rumors and triangulation also play a significant role in how attacks develop around the mirror effect.
When someone feels uncomfortable confronting you directly, they may attempt to shape how others perceive you instead. Conversations begin happening in your absence, where your actions are reinterpreted through negative assumptions. Someone might present their criticism as concern or curiosity when speaking with mutual acquaintances. They might suggest that your intentions are questionable or that your behavior hides some deeper agenda. This strategy allows the person spreading the rumor to influence the narrative without direct confrontation. By recruiting others into the story, they reduce the impact of the mirror or protecting themselves from accountability. Another subtle form of attack appears through boundary testing. When someone feels challenged by your presence, they may begin introducing small acts of disrespect to see how you respond. These moments might appear minor at first, a sarcastic comment here, an ignored boundary there, a small attempt to dismiss your input during a conversation. Each action functions as a test. If you accept the behavior without response, the boundary gradually lowers. If you resist, the person may escalate the behavior or frame your reaction as proof that you are difficult or overly sensitive. The goal is to shift the balance of the relationship so that the mirror becomes less stable. If your standards appear flexible or inconsistent, the reflection loses its power. Finally, exclusion can become a method of punishing the mirror. When someone cannot control your behavior or discredit your character directly, they may attempt to control your access to the group instead. Invitations disappear, conversations happen without you, or opportunities quietly shift away from your direction. This silent distancing allows them to remove the reflection from their environment without addressing the real reason behind the discomfort. By limiting your presence, they reduce the contrast that was forcing them to examine themselves. When you step back and observe these behaviors together, a pattern emerges. The attacks are rarely about a specific mistake you made. They are about managing the emotional pressure created by the mirror you represent. Projection, labeling, mockery, rumor, boundary testing, and exclusion all serve the same purpose: weakening the reflection so the person attacking it does not have to face what it reveals. Once you recognize these patterns, the hostility around you begins making more sense. The reaction was never truly about you. It was about the reflection someone else was not ready to confront. Chosen one, once you recognize the mirror dynamic and the ways people attempt to attack or discredit it, the next step becomes learning how to respond without losing your clarity or your peace. The instinct to defend yourself can feel strong, especially when accusations or rumors begin circulating about your character. Human beings naturally want to correct misinformation and restore fairness. Yet one of the most important lessons in the mirror season is that not every attack is meant to be resolved through argument. When someone is committed to misunderstanding you, no amount of explanation will create understanding. Their goal was never clarity. Their goal was emotional relief from the discomfort your presence created. Engaging in endless debates often feeds the very narrative they were trying to build. The more energy you invest in defending yourself, the more attention their accusations receive. This is why the first principle of a chosen one's response is to stay clean in character. Your behavior must remain consistent with the values that created the mirror effect in the first place. If your integrity triggered the hostility, abandoning that integrity would only validate the accusations being directed at you. Staying clean means refusing to respond with the same tactics that we used against you. It means avoiding gossip, avoiding public retaliation, and avoiding the temptation to damage someone else's reputation simply to restore your own. Over time, consistency becomes your strongest defense.
People who observe your actions begin recognizing the difference between a pattern of calm integrity and a pattern of criticism. The second part of responding wisely involves staying quiet about your inner life. When someone begins attacking the mirror, they often search for additional information they can use to shape the narrative. Details about your plans, relationships, finances, or personal struggles can easily become material for speculation or distortion. This is why privacy becomes a strategic form of protection. Reducing how much you share with environments that have already shown hostility limits the opportunities others have to manipulate the story about you. Moving quietly does not mean living in fear or secrecy. It simply means understanding that not every environment deserves full access to your personal journey. Instead of announcing every plan in advance, you focus on execution. Instead of explaining every decision, you allow your results to speak for themselves. Silence, in this context, is not weakness. It is discipline. By controlling the information you release, you remove the leverage someone else might use to continue attacking the mirror. Another key element of the chosen one response is the use of calm boundaries. Boundaries are not emotional outbursts or dramatic confrontations. They are clear decisions about what behavior you will and will not accept in your presence. When someone attempts to disrespect you through sarcasm, false accusations, or subtle undermining, the healthiest response is often brief and direct. You acknowledge the inaccuracy or the disrespect without entering a long argument. Statements that calmly correct the situation while refusing to escalate it create clarity without feeding the conflict. Once the boundary has been stated, your actions reinforce it. If someone continues the behavior, you reduce contact, end the conversation, or step away from the environment entirely. This approach prevents the cycle of repeated disrespect from continuing. Over time, people learn that your boundaries are not negotiable because your behavior consistently supports them. Perhaps the most powerful element of this response is patience. Time has a unique ability to reveal patterns that arguments cannot expose. When someone attempts to reshape your reputation through projection or rumor, their narrative may appear convincing in the moment, but narratives built on distortion rarely remain stable over long periods. As your behavior remains steady and your work continues producing results, the gap between accusation and reality gradually becomes visible. People who observe both patterns eventually begin questioning the story they were told. Consistency quietly contradicts the narrative without requiring constant defense from you. In this way, time becomes an ally rather than an obstacle. The mirror remains clear, while the attacks eventually reveal their own inconsistency. Responding strategically does not mean becoming passive or allowing others to harm you indefinitely. It means choosing actions that protect your peace and your purpose, rather than reacting impulsively to every provocation. When you remain calm, private, and consistent, the mirror stays intact. The clarity you carry continues reflecting truth, whether others accept it immediately or not. And in many cases, the very discipline that once triggered hostility becomes the reason people eventually recognize the difference between someone who builds quietly and someone who attacks loudly. Chosen one. By the time you understand the mirror season, something inside you begins shifting. The confusion that once followed every attack slowly fades because you finally see the pattern clearly.
The hostility you experienced was not always about your behavior. Often, it was about what your presence revealed. When someone stands in front of a mirror, the mirror does not argue with the reflection. It does not defend itself or attempt to prove what it shows. It simply remains clear. This is the most important lesson of the mirror season. Your role is not to win every argument or convince every critic that your intentions are pure. Your role is to remain aligned with the character and purpose that created the reflection in the first place. The more you try to force understanding from people who are committed to misunderstanding you, the more energy you waste on battles that were never meant to be resolved.
But when you remain steady in who you are, the mirror continues doing its work naturally. Over time, people begin seeing the difference between the narrative created by accusation and the reality revealed through consistency. One of the most powerful realizations that emerges during this stage is that attacks often signal growth rather than failure. When someone's presence begins challenging the emotional patterns around them, resistance is almost inevitable. Growth disrupts environments that rely on comfort and predictability. Your standards raise the emotional temperature of the room because they introduce accountability where there was once none. If your discipline reflects someone else's excuses, or your honesty reflects someone else's manipulation, the mirror you carry will naturally trigger reactions. This does not mean the conflict should define your identity. Instead, it becomes confirmation that your presence is creating awareness. Awareness can lead to transformation for those willing to grow. But for those who resist change, awareness often leads to hostility toward the source of the reflection. Recognizing this dynamic helps you stop interpreting every attack as a personal failure.
Sometimes the reaction around you simply reveals the difference between people who want growth and people who want comfort. The mirror season also carries a spiritual purpose for many people walking a path of personal development. As your character strengthens, the environments around you begin reorganizing. Relationships shift. Some people quietly step away, while others reveal intentions that were previously hidden. What once looked like sudden conflict often turns out to be exposure. The mirror does not only reflect behavior, it also reveals alignment. People who genuinely appreciate integrity and growth tend to move closer to it. They see the reflection as inspiration. But those who feel threatened by that reflection often create distance or attempt to discredit it. Over time, this process separates environments that support your purpose from those that resist it. What initially felt like rejection begins revealing itself as redirection. You are gradually being guided toward spaces where your presence is welcomed rather than resented. This realization brings an important sense of freedom. When you understand that mirrors do not need to fight, you release the pressure to constantly defend your character. Instead of reacting to every accusation, you focus on maintaining clarity within yourself. Your actions remain consistent. Your boundaries remain calm and firm. Your attention stays directed toward building the life you are meant to create, rather than toward managing the opinions of people committed to misunderstanding you. In this space, peace becomes stronger than the need to prove anything. The mirror continues reflecting truth whether someone chooses to look at it honestly or not. As you continue forward, the most important thing you can do is keep the mirror clear. Do not allow bitterness, resentment, or anger to cloud the reflection. Those emotions distort the very clarity that made your presence powerful in the first place.
Staying clear means protecting your integrity, even when others attempt to provoke you. It means maintaining humility while refusing to shrink in order to protect someone else's ego. When your character remains steady, the truth eventually becomes visible without requiring constant defense. The mirror does not need to shout. It only needs to remain honest. And in that honesty, your life becomes a reflection of alignment rather than reaction, guiding you toward environments and relationships that can recognize the light you carry instead of attacking it. If this message found you at the right moment, remember this: not every attack is meant to destroy you. Sometimes it simply reveals what your presence exposes. When you understand the mirror effect, you stop chasing approval from people committed to misunderstanding you. Your responsibility is not to convince everyone of your truth, but to stay aligned with it. Let your character remain clear. Let your actions remain consistent. And allow time to reveal what arguments never could. If this message resonated with your experience, support the channel by liking the video sharing it with someone who has been misunderstood for standing in integrity, and subscribing for more insights on discernment, boundaries, and personal elevation. And if you've experienced the mirror season yourself, comment mirror